Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to my channel. You have reached Crystal Henry TV, and we are on the third part of our series. I'm so excited. It's about her Blacknificent history. I am interviewing no one other than the infamous, the phenomenal, the amazing Professor Gaynell Sapenter Gainer. We left off in session 2 where she's gotten married to my father. For those of you that do not know, I am interviewing my mom, and we decided to do this Black History project because we want the truth about her history to be out, and we don't want it to be missed. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the amazing Professor Gaynell Gainer. Welcome to Crystal Henry TV.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here to share my story. Today being the last day of Black History Month.
Excellent. Well, let's start off with, since you had just gotten married January 1966, that sounds like a great place to start this session 3. So what happened next? Where were you working at that time when you got married?
Yes, I was working at the health department in the San Antonio downtown area. And everything was stable. My husband, now Irvin, was looking to find a job, which he did. He did find a job downtown at the VA office on Dwyer Street. And then several months later, I was fortunate enough to find an opening at Lackland Air Force Base, Wilford Hall. And I accepted that. That was a civil service position. And they did start me off at a GS5 Target 7 position as a radiologic technologist. So this was really the first time I worked in a first class hospital setting as a radiologic technologist with a degree.
Now, excellent. That is so excellent. So at that time, you were coming in as a GS5. Now, were your other co-workers or your colleagues, were they at that same level, or were they at a higher level than you?
They were, remember, attending University of Incarnate Word, which was an all-girls school at the time I attended it. Most of my friends were nursing majors, and several of them had an opportunity to be hired at Wilford Hall. And most of those RNs, 4-year degreed RNs, did start off at a GS7. So that was an early period in which I noticed there was a difference in salary.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, because even now when we look at statistics, we are years and thousands of dollars behind other races. And so it's a blessing that you as a Black woman and my father as a Black man were both able to work for the government. You know, a lot of times the stereotype is that, you know, we are not able, we're not educated, but both of you were able and educated to work for the government, and that is amazing. Now, where did you live at that time?
Relocating to the, I would say, the west side of town, which was where Lackland was. We found a modest 3-bedroom home, and the houses were, we would say, very reasonable at that time. One would not even think we were able to purchase a home around $12,500 at that time. And my husband was surprised to know that he could use his VA loan. And so he did not have to spend a lot of money on a down payment. I think it was something like $49 or $50 down with this VA loan. We were very surprised. But
excellent. That is amazing. Boy, would I love a $50 down payment now to get some property.
Really, you can't even get a car that reasonable.
No, you can't. That is amazing. So you you were married, you started working close to the
Lackland
Lackland Air
Air
Force
Force
Base.
Base,
You
Wilford
found a
Hall.
home, which is amazing to be able to find a home in that area and to be able to purchase one. Thank God for the VA loan. And so then what were you doing at that time? And how was your neighborhood that you lived in? How was that?
It was an integrated neighborhood. There was another Black family that lived at the end of the block from us. On either side of us, there were Anglo people. There was a Hispanic family that lived across the street from us. So we were just very proud to be seemingly living a normal American life at that time.
Excellent. And I remember that house. I remember that was my first best friend was an Anglo girl. And we were like sisters. We grew up together and we spent the night over each other's house. So I know that I did not see color at that age. I just knew that she was my friend and we just got along very well. So with that being said, I know that when I came around, there were some years you had been married for at least a year. And I know that I was just the apple of your eye. I know that it was exciting to be pregnant and working. So after you had me, October of 1967, October 29th, after you had me, I know you spent a few more years working at Lackland. So then where did you go after that?
Yes, I was working roughly between 1966, 67 through 1970, the beginning of 1970. I received, and it was during the Vietnam War, and you can look that up. There were many casualties and many individuals that were serving in the military at that time, mostly Air Force, that were sent to Wilford Hall for all kinds of procedures, extremities, organs like Barry Minimus. I was the Barry Minima queen out there.
Wow.
In fact, about 15 or 20 years, there was a man from the post office, the main post office, came up to me and he says, "Did you perform bare minimas out at Lackland Air Force Base?" I said, "I did." He says, "I think I was one of your patients." And
Wow.
very patient and kind with me. So you never know who's going to remember you. So it's always good to do the best that you can do and be the best you can be at all times.
Absolutely.
I'll stop and pause for a
Absolutely.
moment. You asked
That
me
is
a question about what happened prior to leaving Lackland. I received a call from Mr. George Miller, who, and it was 1968, the fall of 1968. And he called me and he says, there is an opening at St. Philip's College, and there is a chair of nursing and allied health. Miss Peterson, her name was Peggy Powers at the time, and she contacted Mr. Miller, asked him to serve on the advisory board to conduct a search for radiologic technologists to initiate or found the program of radiography technology at St. Philip's College.
So that's how Mr. Miller was the one that brought you in to teach and to instruct the radiology.
Yeah, let me give you a little background on that. First of all, I was surprised to hear from Mr. Miller because it was like 6 years or so since I heard from him. The last time we visited with one another, remember in our previous session, he was invited to go to the Ear, Eye, Nose, and Throat Hospital and clinic and observed me. And I did not know at the time that he was really inspecting my work. And he did at the end of meeting with me and walking around and observing me for over an hour. He did ask me what I consider or had I ever thought about teaching. And I told him, no, I had never thought about that, but I was interested. And of course, at that particular time, the physician that was his superior, the radiologist, he at that time did not think it was appropriate to think about hiring me. So I was denied. So here we come 6 or 7 years later, and Mr. Miller said he never forgot me. And he says he talked to the supervisor at St. Philip's, and he told her, he said, because she did ask him would he consider teaching and starting the program. He was already a program director at Robert B. Greene Hospital, and he was thinking about retiring. So he said to me, I really think you should consider this position because this is an Associate of Applied Science degree program, and the students need to have someone with a degree higher than theirs. And he said, you're the only person in town that I could find that had a degree of this sort in radiologic technology. So I stepped out on faith after meeting with the chair of the Nursing and Allied Health Division at that time.
Well, you know, you must have left a mighty strong impression on him for him to come back 6 or 7 years later after he examined your work and to stay on his mind to pursue you for this position. So you had to have impressed him. So I think that is amazing for him to remember you, remember your name, and find you and bring you in. So
I think it was divine guidance. I really do.
Yes, absolutely. God is always.
Me. And I told my students after I started teaching, I said, just remember, students, you never know who's watching. So always put your best foot forward, you know, and do the best you can. If you don't know the answer to something, just simply say, I'll research it and, you know, I'll get back. And that's what I told them. I'll research it and I'll get back with you. But always try to do the best you can. And I think he was very impressed with my work, and he thought that I had the right temperament. I was very patient with him. I didn't seem intimidated by all the questions he asked, and he said, you seem to be the right type of person for this move to initiate a radiography program.
So you initiated a radiography program at St. Philip's College. Now, St. Philip's College was a minority or mostly or majority of minority college. So yes. Where was it located, and what tools did you have to get started? What were the obstacles that you had to overcome to start this program?
Thank you. When I met with Dr. Powers, later Peterson, I did ask her about the setting that I was going to be moving into. And after a brief discussion, she told me, you really are starting from scratch. There is no lab. There are no funds. There are no books. So it was a real challenge. And
so you're entered in with no books, no funds, no previous history of it ever being. So you literally started everything from scratch.
Absolutely nothing. The only thing that I can tell you that was hopeful was the fact that Mr. Miller believed in me, and he says, I'm retiring, and he invited me over to his home. His wife was an RN. She passed before he did. He lived until he was 95 years old.
Wow.
Yes, he enjoyed retirement for a while, but he did invite me to his home, and he says, I'm willing to give you all the books that I started with or that I have, and any equipment that I have that I think will help you to at least get started. And he did that. Also, I had to be very resourceful because I had to do research. I went out to Fort Sam and I found out that they had equipment that they had discarded. So I went to an Army surplus place on Ackerman Road. I'll never forget the street. I
Wow.
looked at their discards and I found out that there was equipment there that I could use that could be, refurbished. They use that word, refurbished, repurposed. And so I was not able to get that equipment immediately, but it did come. I started the program in July. We actually had our first class in the fall of 1970, but I was able to get this refurbished equipment. And one thing that I did not know at the time that I accepted the job was that at San Antonio College, they had the announcement and the information about a radiography technology program coming to San Antonio College, and they had the equipment. They had a General Electric unit and a Miss Carson who was in charge of health careers over there. She was teaching medical assistant courses and certificate courses for allied health, but she did not have certification as a radiologic technologist. So they found out that she could not operate the equipment that was sitting at San Antonio College. And so we were very fortunate that a year later, even 72, 73, I found out that I could at least take my class over to San Antonio College, and I was able to hire a lady that was a radiologic technologist, Miss Marr, and I hired her as a clinical instructor, and together we were able to conduct classes at San Antonio College for several semesters until we could get equipment over on St. Philip's campus. And that was a blessing.
That is amazing how you had to start teaching your first classes and come up with your own curriculum.
Yes.
And it's one thing coming through a program, it's one thing graduating from a program or radiology technology from that program that you graduated from at Incarnate Word. It's one thing to come through a program and work in that area, but then to become a teacher, an instructor, a program director, a program creator, a program developer. That's a whole nother level of expertise, another level of study. And I remember when I was little that you would make these transparencies. I remember the projector that you would have it projected against the wall, and you would have to draw on the transparencies with a special marker or pen. I remember that as a little girl, and I did not understand what you had to go through in order to develop the transparencies, develop the program to have tests and quizzes, to the way you instructed your students. I remember you grading papers, lots and lots of papers, and I would see different skeletal shapes, and not knowing fully what you were doing, but I knew that you would be up after it was my bedtime. So I knew you stayed up late, and I knew you got up early in the morning. Those are the things that I remember, and I can't imagine what kind of obstacles that you had to go through in creating all of this from scratch. So can you tell us about the books or the I know you wrote curriculum, but how you had to develop work papers and worksheets in order for your students to pass their courses?
Yes, I did have to develop course syllabi. Introduction to Radiography was the first course that I developed. And you must note that in my first year, first 2 semesters, I did not have enough semester credit as an instructor to just dedicate my teaching to radiography technology. So they expected me to teach medical terminology. They expected me to assist in a chemistry lab in the biology division, biological science area. So I was a multi-skilled, and I must thank God for the opportunity I had to learn lab, occupational therapy, physical therapy at the Refugio, Texas, Texas, back in 1962, 63. And so having that background, that multi-skilled background, I was able to effectively teach medical terminology. I could draw upon my experience. And then I was able to assist in the lab and biology and science areas because of my pre-med background, because I had to take comparative anatomy, I took anatomy and physiology, chemistry, all the courses that they could throw at me that had to do with science, because the curriculum in radiologic technology at Incarnate Word was a pilot program. It was brand new. And they just threw every course they could think at me, and I was able to graduate and get through that. I was also having to be required to cover the full curriculum that the hospital-based program at Santa Rosa that they had. Those students only had to concentrate on the didactic courses in radiologic technology, but I had to complete the college level courses as well as the didactic or clinical education courses that the hospital-based students had to complete. So that was a challenge. So to think about the fact that I'm here in a college setting now, I'm having to build a first-class curriculum for radiography technology. Yes, I did have to imagine who can I hire until I can get people trained. So I sought out on campus. There was a gentleman that taught in the electronics department, and his name was Casey, Mr. Casey. And those are the days when they wore skinny ties. And so some of the students would say, this is Mr. Skinny Tie. But he taught physics. You know, it was a while before we could get someone who was not only a radiographer or radiologic technologist to be educated enough to teach what we call the pertinent radiography technology physics. So I did lean upon the chair and program director of electronics to help me with some of the courses that had to do with, you know, magnetism, and courses that were leaning heavily on physics for radiographic technique. And I was able to successfully get through that.
That is phenomenal, because people don't understand what you had to go through in order to launch this program. And how many students, can you tell us how many students were in your first class?
There were about 15 or so students that started, and we had about 6 or 7 that graduated from that program. And
so you were a tough cookie, a tough teacher.
The students were actually there. I talked to one of the students last year. We celebrated, not fully because of the pandemic. I met with one of the graduates of the first class, Mr. Casanova. Isn't that something? What a
That
name.
is something. That is
And I did, with his help, I was able to gather, the names of the students that graduated from that program. And like I said, it was under 10, but they are outstanding. And he, Mr. Casanova, mentioned that the course was challenging, but what caused, I said, how did you happen to select radiography technology? He said, I saw you on television. There was a commercial. And he said, your program seemed to be more interesting than some of the programs in allied health. And he says, when I saw the x-ray film and, I did have a view box and I did project an x-ray film and I showed some equipment. He says he was fascinated by the equipment and the fact that he could actually take x-rays. So he is very accomplished and he's dwelled in Seguin and became a supervisor, and he also became multi-skilled in imaging. So he has several certifications under diagnostic imaging. And
you left that part out. I did not know that you were on commercials too. That is great.
I did have to recruit.
Yeah. So you recruited by commercial. So not only were you an instructor or creator of a phenomenal radiologic technology program, but you were also the spokesmodel for that program for St. Philip's College in San Antonio, Texas. And St. Philip's College is still around. The program is still in place. And that is because of the phenomenal foundation that you started with.
With God's help.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. That is amazing. So with that being said, that takes us to about 1973.
Yes, roughly 73, 74. My first class, the program was 24 months. So the first class had started in 1970. They graduated in 1972, 73. And the next class came on board, and they had the privilege of still spending time over at San Antonio College using the lab. And then after that, we moved over to St. Philip's College. I was also doing some recruiting at Fort Sam, the Academy of Health Sciences. And I must say that semester after semester, I would accompany the registrar at St. Philip's College to talk to students about having an affiliation with St. Philip's while they were in the military at Fort Sam Houston. And we always had at least 35 or 40 students that would enroll in the program of radiography, so they had their dual education. They would take courses at the Academy of Health Sciences, and some courses they would be taking at St. Philip's College, their academic portion. So when it wound up being, it was in the early 80s, that I learned that there was money in the bursar's office, the business office, and it was related to recruitment and registration for radiologic technology. And so I was able to retrieve enough money to buy a first time brand new x-ray unit. And I did work in the lab, yes. I used a building that was brick at the end of the campus on what we know now as Martin Luther King and Walter Street. It was on the corner. And there was a building, because St. Philip's was known for its shops. They had automotive, air conditioning, etc. And so I used one of those rooms that became vacant, and I was able to have that x-ray equipment installed there. And so also I must say that the Alamo College District, which was called Alamo Community College District, we had a multi-campus administrative setup at that time. And so we had the colleges were governed under one president and several campuses. At that time, it was St. Philip's, San Antonio College, and later Palo Alto College came on board. So it was 3 colleges at that time. Now it's 5, but let me just focus on this. The main point is we were a campus which we had to reach out to the administration from the Alamo Community College District, and they gave us permission to have that X-ray equipment that was at San Antonio College moved over to St. Philip's College. So we were very fortunate.
So at that time, it sounded like the San Antonio College Radiologic Technology Program
Never got off the ground.
Never got off the ground in 1970 when you started, and that they had the new equipment back then.
They had the new equipment, but they did not have access to anyone with my credentials.
Exactly. And that's amazing, because the difference between Alamo Community College, or SAC, and St. Philip's was that SAC was majority or predominantly Anglo, and St. Philip's was predominantly African American and Latino. And so
exactly,
that the underdog at that time, the least likely.
We were referred to as the stepchildren.
Yes, it was least likely to have that program, had the program. So nobody but God can do something like that for the people of color. And so that is amazing, as well as you being able to work with the Army and Air Force bases to get students to take your program. That is amazing as well.
Now, so they were matriculating from Fort Sam while my students, civilian students, were taking the radiography course as I set it up. So we were really having a great time with many students to deal with. And I was the program director and advisor at that time for all the students. And my task was very challenging, but nevertheless, I prayed my way through everything. And I must say that once the courses were pretty much established and approved, and we had to have approval by the Joint Review Committee on Education and Radiologic Technology. And I think it's important to note that St. Philip's College has its Episcopal history. So it was Episcopal based college, and it became a part of the, I would say, the Alamo Community College District in the mid-40s, like 1945, 46. It became a part of the San Antonio Union Junior College District. That's a long name. And they changed it. They
yes, it is. Well, you know, that is amazing. So we've gone through the first 10 years of your radiologic technology program at St. Philip's College. You graduated approximately 5 classes of students. You launched that program. You stayed steady in that program. You kept the accreditation. So we are going to end this session 3. We'll pick up in the 80s for session 4. And I hope that you have enjoyed this phenomenal history. There's more to come. You don't want to miss it. So I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share. Share this information. Get this magnificent history out there to all those that need to hear it. Again, there's much more. Professor Gaynell Gainer, I appreciate you joining me and giving